two, one.
All right. Well, we have another day where we don't have school, and so I apologize. I can't control the weather as much as I want to, I guess. But what we're going to do is we're going to give you a quick little overview of what we're going to do in class today, and didn't get a chance to. So we're talking about Napoleonic Europe. Compare the last notes with these notes and see if we can make this whole thing work, I guess, as best we can. I apologize. It's one of those cases where I can't fix it. I don't know what to do because of the days we've had off and stuff, and I apologize greatly for the inconvenience we have going on here. But let's take a look at Napoleonic Europe. One of the things Napoleon is most famous for is his battles and wars and conflicts, that kind of stuff. We looked at his domestic policy in the last video. Here's going to be his essentially more his wartime policies, foreign policy. You can see just on the map here how much area Napoleon adds from 1789 over, starting with France, expanding out into Italy, acquisitions that he has, going to Confederation, taking this part over later on. His allies are kind of joining with him over time, and eventually his battles as he fights in both Egypt and over here in Moscow, Spain, etc. We know that he controls a good chunk of Europe at one point here as essentially emperor as we create this idea of a French empire. And so let's talk about his first campaign. So one of his big first campaigns as the emperor or the first consul of France is against the British, right? And it's a question of sea power. And where Napoleon could run an army, he had no idea how to run a navy. Here is what we see in terms of the combined French and Spanish fleets that are here, what's called the Battle of Trafalgar in 1805. Essentially, you have the British fleet that comes in here off the coast of Trafalgar, which is off the coast of Spain over here, kind of near the Strait of Gibraltar. And essentially, the British move in here and break the back of the Spanish fleet and end up separating the fleet and tearing everything apart. It's a huge loss because now France loses its sea power. It's a big deal. Okay, obviously in London you have Trafalgar Square. It's a good defeat a good win for the British. Those kind of things. And it plays a big role in the future we have for France. Now the overland campaigns is the biggest we have, and the first one is a campaign in 1805 in Italy and in the Danube being southern Russia. And so his big opponents here are Britain, Austria, and Russia, what they call a third coalition. Now, these coalitions, they explain, are the groups that fought together. So now the first war was underneath the First Republic. That was the first coalition they fought against, mostly Austria-Prussia. Second coalition, Austria-Prussia, Prussia-Britain. Here up to our third coalition now in terms of fighting against Napoleon. And so what Napoleon does, he chooses to invade into northern Italy and takes over Italy, that kind of stuff, defeats the British and Austrian and Russian troops in Italy, and takes over that section of Italy. And he is crowned King of Italy in May of 1805. And so he's adding this list of, titles and stuff to his whole deal. Besides French Emperor, he's also those things too. Here he kind of has a picture of crossing the Alps. We see him kind of akin himself to Hannibal in that way, that he took his army across the Alps. He probably didn't look like this. He probably rode a lot more extravagance and stuff. The other painting is him on the horse rearing up, all that kind of thing, to show his image of Napoleon. So you see the image plays a big role in his paintings here. Definitely kind of more of that what's called the romantic style that becomes popular in the 19th century. And we'll talk about that a little more later on. But you can see him being shown here as a man of the people. You kind of see him being shown in the other painting, more famous one of you have in your document packet, being that that on a rearing horse, that kind of stuff. But he defeats his army. And one of the biggest things he knows how to do, and the reason he wins his armies, he wins his wars, because he is a master of logistics. One of the things that Napoleon figured out as he fights in 1806 is his supply lines. He was a master artillery guy, first of all, too. He knew how to position artillery, those kind of things, but he also knew how to run supply. And so he essentially was a great logistics manager, is what he was. He knew how to run supply lines back and forth, knew how to take care of soldiers that way. He had a famous quote, "Army marches on its stomach," which is kind of true. If you have well-fed soldiers that are healthy, they're going to fight a hell of a lot better for you than soldiers that are half dead. He also knew how to help soldiers convalesce and help soldiers get back into the fight, and created some of the first ever ambulance services to run injured soldiers back and forth in carts and those kind of things. So he moves up from Italy now, okay, or obviously he takes over this section here. Now we take what's called the Confederation of the Rhine, which essentially is Prussia and a few of the other little groups that are little city-states that are over here as well. And so he attacks them, defeats them, and we have Jena, here, we have French troops in Berlin. And so he has French troops that are in Berlin, and we have what's called the Berlin Decrees. And the Berlin Decrees are going to be what are called is Napoleon's continental system. Essentially, the last people left to fight against are the Prussians and the British. And so the continental system is a way to make sure that Napoleon can totally control essentially Europe, right? And so he basically cut off all British ships from European ports and said, you can't go there. So he cut off any kind of port that he controls, which would be essentially everywhere now, from the Italian peninsula all the way around to areas of Prussia. He said no more British ships. That way, he's trying to kill Britain's trade empire. Plus, they can't use anything to resupply the enemies that he has on the continent. Britain Council is called the Order in Council, where it said that Britain, any ship stopping in Britain, would be seized when it entered the continent. So this is where we have a problem. We're going to see this actually cause War of 1812 in the United States, because now the U.S. can't go there either. So Britain says, fine, you're not going to let us trade the continent. We're not going to be able to trade the continent either, and lock them off as well. And so then top it off, Napoleon counters the Order in Council with the Milan Decree, which says that any ship stopping in Britain would be seized when it entered the continent as well. Essentially trying to lock trade off, make sure they can't economically go any further. All those things definitely does lead to War of 1812 in the United States, which is all about impressment of sailors and ships, where essentially these two groups are trying to stop each other from taking over, trade on the European continent. So here's the magic line we have of essentially where people cannot trade from, and it's going to become a big deal in Spain in a few years. We kind of see, obviously, the British cartoon here of Napoleon. I love British cartoons. They're so funny. As you can see, Napoleon here being held by Satan and holding all kinds of his arms. So you can kind of see how the British felt about Napoleon that way. They were not fans of the man. So Poland was the next one. So obviously we'd seen Russia, Austria, and Prussia carve up Poland in the end of the 18th century. Well, now we have France rolling through there. And so as Napoleon rolls in, his army defeats Russian troops, they occupy Königsberg, East Prussia, he is named Grand Duchy of Warsaw as well. And so every time Napoleon takes over an area, he gets to be named king or whatever the ruler title is of that neck of the woods as well. Here we have a great image, I love this, of his imperial image. Napoleon on the imperial throne. So obviously the guy who hated monarchy is now a king, basically. We notice there's definitely some Caesar-inspired elements to this as well, with the laurels on his head. Some other inspirations of maybe earlier French kings, those kind of deals as well, in the scepter, all that kind of stuff, to show all different ruling pieces he has, and make sure he has all those different ruling pieces, Italy, Prussia, etc., with the staves and all those kind of things, and the sword to show what he rules. One of the problems that Napoleon had, though, is that while he was ruling everything, he didn't have a son. He was married to Josephine, a very lovely Austrian lady, and she was unable to bear a son for him. And so in 1807, they divorced. And the idea here, kind of following, when Henry VIII, is that she can have a son. And I remember put this under Josephine's divorce statement. It's kind of funny to kind of compare the two pieces here, where she says, with permission of our August, to your husband, I declare that, having no hope of bearing children, who fill the needs of his policy, the interests of France, I am pleased to offer him the greatest proof of attachment and devotion ever offered on this earth. But yet, I'm going to divorce you. So she's divorcing so that he can fulfill his policies. Compare that to Napoleon's divorce statement. Far from ever finding cause for complaint, I can, to the contrary, only congratulate myself on the devotion and tenderness of my beloved wife. She has adorned 13 years of my life. The memory will always remain engraved in my heart. Either way, they get divorced. It's kind of interesting to see kind of how and why, and he congratulates himself on his awesome wife. Interesting dude, let's put it that way. But obviously, it's a big deal because where the Catholic Church feels on divorce. But we do have him marrying Maria Louise of Austria instead. They're married in Vienna. And very quickly afterwards, she bears him a son. So here we have his new wife with his son, Napoleon Francis Joseph Charles, who, actually lived to the age of 21, but that's a whole other story. So he has his family as a firstborn. What's going to kind of end up sinking Napoleon here is going to be the Peninsular Campaign. So the 3 Years' War about the continental system. And the whole problem is that Portugal wanted to trade with anybody they wanted to. And so Spain being connected to France through the Bourbon line, they kind of thought that Spain would back them up. Well, Spain did not. And so when Spain refused to essentially invade Portugal, make them comply with the continental system, Napoleon invaded everybody. This is a big deal, right? And they call for Napoleon, they call Spain the Spanish ulcer because it kind of just tore away at him and at his emperorship. They used a lot of resources and wasted time in Portugal and Spain and didn't really get much out of it. And so Napoleon had to kind of basically, trick the Spanish king and prince come to France. He said, come to France, we'll talk about things, we'll make a treaty, and he imprisons him or keeps him there and makes his brother the new king of Spain. And then he ends up moving 100,000 French troops into Berlin. And so the Spanish, not dealing with this, rose up in rebellion. And this is on May 2nd of 1808. And so they call it Dos de Mayo. So the Spanish rise up in rebellion. They fight against the Spanish people are there. And then in Madrid, the French troops will fire on the crowd. And so it's kind of like a version of the Boston Massacre type deal. And it's by a great artist named Goya. We'll look more Goya stuff later on. He makes this in 1810. But you can kind of see the Spanish version of this event where you can see the Spanish holding their arms up here and being shot to death by the French troops. And it's a big deal, right? And so it's publicized everywhere. And Spain fights against France. And so Napoleon pours all these resources, all these resources in there. And it was like this guerrilla war happening in Spain. And the British then get in here as well. So the British bring an army into Portugal. They helped all the Spanish guerrillas, help them out. And so, until the emperors never do well with guerrilla wars. And so Napoleon wastes a ton of resources, men, manpower, and money, equipment, etc., trying to take over Spain. In the end, he doesn't. He ends up having to take his troops out, and Spain never really comes along with that. Going on forward here, you kind of see a nice look up by David again, kind of guy who the main revolutionary painter. You see Napoleon in this classical style, classical pose. That becomes a big deal this time in terms of kind of that neoclassical movement here with Napoleon's standing figure. You almost kind of see the Alice of the Baroque with his calves out here as well, and his hand kind of tucked in. Very classical, single solitary pose. Definitely a throwback to the kind of old school classical style. So here is the empire in 1810. Notice who's at war, right? Spain's at war. Sweden's kind of at war right now. Russia is, kind of allied with at this point, kind of allies with Austria and parts of Russia. And as Napoleon has a huge empire, he'll take his family and make them essentially rule over different places. So his brother Jerome was king of Westphalia. His brother Joseph, obviously, already the king of Spain. He has his sister become queen. Louis become the king of Holland. Pauline, I think it was his sister, I believe, is princess. His son is king of Rome. He's a baby. He's like 2 years old, right? Gives essentially, ruling power to everybody in his family. And it's kind of cool how he does that. And he divides up his empire that way. Notice again the whole neoclassical idea with the eagle and his mild Caesar worship obsession fetish thing going on here, okay? And kind of see just kind of where everybody is in terms of who the opponents are, and kind of this little ring going around with, from Portugal to Great Britain, Sweden, and Russia kind of being his opponents at this point, and who's his allies and that kind of stuff. So kind of this ring around him at this point, and who the Bonapartes are that are ruling. So we show Joseph in Spain, and Napoleon obviously ruling over France, and Louis and King of Holland up here. It's kind of a cool little diagram, just kind of see who rules everything and how how everything's split up in his empire that way. So the big blunder, and everyone kind of knows already about Napoleon, is that he chooses to invade Russia. And if anybody knows this, always written down somewhere that he never invade Russia in winter, just like he never played games with Chancellor Sicilian. And so he goes to this overland campaign in Russia, and he leads this huge army at the time, the largest army that ever been seen in the modern world, of 614 men. Some French, others are allies from Austria and Eastern Europe, and marches them across into Russia. And so the Russians are smart in that they just kind of lead him through the Russian countryside, letting Napoleon burn up his resources, letting him burn up his materials, wear his guys out, little battles here and there, but no big overall battle that Napoleon can use his superior number of superior resources to do. And so obviously in Russia, like they've done the Great Northern War as well, let's draw people in and wait for the Russian winter to come through and bury the opponents. And that's exactly what they do. The French get sucked so far into Russia that winter comes. And to help out this process, the Russian nobles will leave their estates and institute what's called a scorched earth policy, where they burn everything, leaving the French nothing to plunder, nothing to use, nothing to take. And so, as much as a master of supply and stuff Napoleon is, he's got to try to find a way to operate, his stretched out supply lines, and just doesn't work because he can't bring his resources from France all the way over to Russia. And so his army starts, fading a little bit. The city of Moscow was burned down as scorched earth policy, made sure that Napoleon can't take anything from it. And so then, as his troops are worn down, they're tired, they're hungry, General Kutuzov, who has a great picture as he's sitting here, like, do this. Love this painting, right? Almost I think he's drunk with this painting, but whatever. They defeat the French army in this battle because the Russian troops are, they're well fed, they're well rested, and the French troops are not, because they can't stretch a supply along so long. And so with the defeat here, you have to have Napoleon start retreating back to France throughout the Russian winter. And that's going to be his death now, because he starts off with 100,000 troops, only 40,000 survive. They still do digs and stuff around Poland and through eastern Russia where Western Russia, where they will dig through and find evidence of bodies and stuff, and just random bodies found buried with French attire and French materials with them, because so many people died and it was impossible because they froze and starved to death. Obviously, now you have France being beaten down here, and you have a sixth coalition comes together of Britain, Russia, Spain, Portugal, Prussia, Austria, essentially everybody in Europe now attacks Napoleon's depleted army. And at the Battle of Dresden, he's defeated. They get he's defeated a few times. They regroup, come back, they get a French victory, but at a very big time cost, where you have, 30,000 casualties. At Leipzig is where you see a big defeat for the French army. You see this cool memorial there where he is defeated Leipzig by a combined sixth coalition force. And as the Allied forces march now into Paris, he has to abdicate the throne. He puts his son, little itty bitty Napoleon, in power there, but there's essentially the Allies want to have an unconditional surrender where they get rid of him. So when he's exiled and stuff, they sign the treaty and basically say that Napoleon has to be kicked out of France to go to Elba with an annual income of 2 million francs. He just live there, pretty much in luxury. That way he can't come back to Europe and cause more trouble. Soon, we'll see. When this happens, essentially the French Revolution is over for the most part. The royalists who were still there, the middle-class royalists, will take over. They'll put Louis XVIII back on the throne. That would be Louis XVI's brother, I believe. And here's his abdication papers. Said, I'm leaving the throne voluntarily, right? And he's exiled to Elba, off the coast of Italy. He's over there, no big deal, no problem. We have Louis XVIII, who tries to bring back the more royalist policies again of France. No big deal, right? Until Napoleon returns. He comes there for what they call the 100 days, when he's going to land with an army, in France, and he is going to kind of start trying to come back and take over his areas. And so we have the coalition come back again. Sixth coalition comes back and tries to defeat everybody. Now, at this point, Napoleon's wife and kid are in the hands of the Austrians. They're kept there, kind of held hostage in a way. And Napoleon are trying to find a way to defeat and get, his power back. Battle of Waterloo in what is now Belgium is kind of the distinguishing battle here, where you kind of see where everybody is. So here we see a few, the army of people and the soldiers still love Napoleon. The soldiers fought for him. The soldiers wanted to fight for him. A lot of people actually wanted to see Napoleon come back to become Emperor of France. I thought things were better at that time. He only has an army of 120,000 people, and they're uprising and stuff in parts of France, and everybody kind of opposes Napoleon. And so enough people come against him. He's defeated at Waterloo by the Duke of Wellington, who kind of gets very, very famous because of his defeat. And then Napoleon is now exiled to St. Helena, essentially off the coast of Africa somewhere, hoping that that's far enough away that he's not going to come back and cause more trouble. So here's his house. It's a cool little place. You can go visit it if you want to, where he was exiled. And eventually he does die from most natural causes. And so we hear his tomb today. Napoleon's tomb is an unmarked tomb. His name is not on it because of questions about what he did and those kind of things. But ever known as Napoleon. As here you can see Hitler visiting Napoleon's tomb in 1940. It's kind of cool. So one thing I'll post online for you guys what Napoleon's legacy is. You get your chance to roast or toast Napoleon. The idea of him being some kind of evil dictator type guy, or if he was a great ruler. And so I have the opportunity to do that probably after the final exam, just because of the days we've lost, which I know sucks. I'm sorry. But we'll try and get caught up here and see it and do the best we can. So thank you for your time and your attention. Look at Napoleon's legacy. Make sure both videos ready. Documents are there as well, ready to. We'll talk about that a little bit on Tuesday and get your check is ready for your period 2 test. Thank you for your attention. I truly appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in class. Enjoy your impromptu day off with some AP Euro fun. Thank you.